Hey guys. As a layperson, practicing Buddhism or Dhamma can seem a bit difficult as the circumstances are less than ideal. And they are not ideal, that is a simple truth. But it would be optimal to be a monastic. That is not an option for some people for various reasons. And there are reasons. Ultimately, they are your responsibility, but you have kids or other people depend on you as an example, or you have debt, then you simply cannot be a monastic for the time being. Yet that does not mean that progress is impossible at all. In fact, there were countless very advanced lay practitioners at the time of the Buddha, and the same is possible today. That said, it would be good to optimize your life for practice, and that is today's video's topic. But first, what do typical lay conditions for practice look like? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that most ordinary people optimize their living conditions towards sensual gratifications. They want to feel good as much as possible. They want comfort and all those things. They buy lots of stuff that increases their safety, comfort, way beyond what is possible or was possible in the history of known civilization. In the West, even the poor have better access to sources of gratification than many kings back in the days. Or in short, lay life usually revolves around good feelings, especially of the sexual kind. And further, there is plenty of food and sleep, family, company, and other luxuries. It's all around comfort, safety, and all those things. Even if you live somewhat restrained, you almost certainly have access to those things if you live in the city, as an example. And the living conditions of a monastic, however, are very different. They still do have theoretical access to all those things. They do not have it immediately, or at least if they practice, as the Buddha suggested, they live withdrawn from all of that, but they could revert back to the lower life, as they put it. Many monks and scholars do not live like that at all, but even they have much less access to sensual gratification. They live a celibate lifestyle and have basically renounced most of the worldly material goods. In that sense, it is good to mention that you only truly renounce something when you give up your mental dependence on something. If you throw away a physical good, then you have not renounced it. Then you just have no access to it right now. But they have no access to fashion, no, fancy hairstyles, no makeup, no material possessions that exceed the minimum, and oftentimes they have very little company, at least if they practice rightly. So the difference in both lifestyles should be very obvious, and it should make sense why the Buddha said that it is difficult, but not impossible, to live the perfect holy life at home. Home life is indeed dusty and crowded and full of duties and responsibilities, where it is hard not to be attached and not to be involved. Or in short, as best as possible, the livelihood of a monk takes you physically and mentally away from the world of the senses. You eat little, sleep little, do not distract yourself, talk little, have little company, and have to abide by a strict set of rules that regulate what you should and should not do. Or in short, the social and physical environments as a monk incentivize renunciation, while the lay life or the lay environment incentivizes, let's say, acquisition and ownership. The Buddha even said that for a monk with sensual thoughts who lives in the forest, growth is expected, while for a withdrawn monk in the village, decline is inevitable. Even more importantly, this statement was made at a time when access to sensual pleasures was much more limited. People back then enjoyed tasty foods, comfy beds, sandalwood, and scented garlands, as well as sexuality and not TV shows, but theater shows and things like that. But none of those things come even close to the gratification we can have at the click of a button right now. Or in short, today it is even more difficult to live a lifestyle that facilitates fewness of desires at home. That said, it might be difficult and require work, but it is surely possible to improve the settings, and it is surely possible to give all those things up once you have truly noticed the drawback. But let us now try to analyze what the Buddha explained as the goals of the practice and how the environment can help with that, no matter if layperson or monastic, because there is no true difference when it comes to the practice. It is the same practice. It's a bit like, and I use that example sometimes, it's a bit like a recreational weightlifter versus a professional weightlifter. While one person gets paid for training, as an example, and the other person not, the training is identical. If you want to get strong, you have to go through certain motions, through certain training regimes, you have to eat a certain way, you have to sleep, and yeah, this is how you make progress. There's no difference in the training between professional and recreational, and the same is true for monks. In fact, the practice of both is pretty much the same. It is just that monks and nuns are aided by stricter rules and more shame and fear of wrongdoing. They are more sincere in their practice. They are more committed. As a first goal of almost all practitioners should be the right view, we analyze it from that angle, because without the right view, there is no path. There is practice, don't get me wrong, but it's not yet path. Path just means it is a noble component, so to speak, of the training. Or in short, we have a look at precepts, the factors of right livelihood, that is theoretically only available from right view onwards. The right from right livelihood comes from the right view, and a few more modern additions. And then we really try to see how to optimize your lay settings. But first, it is necessary to give you a bit of context. The Buddha explained sensuality as a man's lustful intentions, as well as a trip. Following those lustful intentions is like entering the territory of a predatory animal, or Mara the evil one. This is the image that the Buddha used most often. You go there looking forward to enjoying yourself. But that very joy means that you have to leave a place of safety and move to, well, for example, a tree with tasty fruit or something else. And by going into that domain, you ignore the danger and only have eyes for the reward in the end. You accumulate debt, so to speak, by going further and further into the domain, and you have to pay back that debt and become liable to all the bad things. It hopefully makes sense that an escape from such a domain is easier if there are fewer temptations everywhere that try to pull you in that direction, if there were fewer traps set up. I mean, the problem is not the trap in itself. The problem is that you want what is inside of the trap. So what are the first things you must do to leave the domain of Mara, the evil one? And by the way, it just means that you enter a domain where you are liable to suffer. If you climb up a tree to get the fruit, the tree could fall down. And it will at some point if you stay in there. And if it's not your tree, because it's Mara, the evil one's tree, then he can just cut it down and you will meet with deadly disaster. That's kind of the point of it all. Yeah, the first thing you must do anyway, you must put a limit on your cravings by introducing self-rules like the 5 precepts. Craving is endless. It is limitless. You will sooner or later approach a point where keeping even simple precepts hurt on a bad day. That said, you want to keep them unconditionally. You want to take them with a series of never again breaking them at all. Don't make it possible under any circumstance to ever break those precepts. You want to truly renounce those behaviors that are associated with the precepts and never do them again, well, in a reasonable manner. Reasonable just means if your life is on the line, something like that, then sure, decide against it. But in basically any case, it's better to keep them unconditionally. And even if your life is on the line, one could argue that's not good to break them anyway. Yeah. So the 5 precepts are the beginning that shelter you from the worst kind of behaviors that lead you further down the road of suffering. You don't kill, you don't steal, you don't rape or cheat, you don't lie, and you don't intoxicate or numb yourself with drugs or other substances that lead to heedlessness. And there are many substances that lead to heedlessness, even if they are not, well, classified as drugs. And the 8 precepts take things even a step further and also limit your access to physical gratification and comfort, as well as sensual distractions. What remains are outlets, so to speak, that you could do to have something to do at all, which is work, socializing, and sleep, which the Buddha ironically named as hindrances of higher practice, or hindrances for a Sotapanna and beyond. Only take the 8 precepts, by the way, if you are firmly established in the 5, and maybe observe the Upasattva, well, the full half moon events, etc., to give you your frequent instant gratification detoxes that show you the debt that you have accumulated. This is why the Buddha said that a person who observes the Upasattva has a chance at realizing the Dhamma. Why? Because they can notice how craving is actually painful, how you have to be apart from all of your sensuality at some point in the future, and how that does not feel good at all. And the more you engage, the more it will hurt. The more you don't want to observe the Upasattva. Yeah. Anyway, when you live somewhat withdrawn and secluded from most things that average people enjoy, you could take things a bit further. The Buddha named 5 additional things a person should reflect on frequently if they want to attain the right view. In the, for example, Anguttara Nikaya, Sutta number 5.114. The first thing is basically to limit sensuality as much as you can without, well, falling back and binging pretty much. The Patimokkha, the code of conduct for monks and nuns, pretty much, precepts, and seeing the danger in the tiniest thought regarding virtue and views is pretty much what aids you in this quest. And the second thing is a bit more advanced and already requires firmly established mindfulness. You want to guard your senses by trying to maintain strong awareness. In being aware, you cannot be absorbed at the same time and see problems approaching from a distance and may intervene. So you can say no to whatever your senses desire in advance and pull the mind back. You pull the leash and do not allow the mind to go there. In the end, it is a taming, a training of the mind. And the importance of this cannot be overstated. You really want to try and learn all those behaviors that have you lose mindfulness, which is a default mode of being, by the way, absorbed in this. And a big chunk of practice is nothing but that. Be watchful of your intentions of greed, aversion, and distraction. And this is no other word than, or other formulation than be watchful of your cravings. Be watchful where the mind pulls you. Be watchful where it wants to go. And do not allow it if it is unwholesome. You want to learn the difference between wholesome and unwholesome behaviors. This is exactly the knowledge of the Sotapanna. And that requires you to watch your intentions, because wholesome and unwholesome are 100% in your intentions. So you cannot understand the Dhamma if you do not understand craving and your intentions. And any kind of practice that is apart from that, does not take that into consideration, can never lead to the breakthrough to the Dhamma. Which is why no mechanical set of meditation instructions can ever lead to a breakthrough to the Dhamma. You can get a breakthrough to the Dhamma while doing those things, but it is despite doing that, since you also do other things right at the time, and not because of, which is a very, very crucial difference. Anyway, remember, it is a training and you are working against years or decades, pretty much, of prior conditioning, and it might take some time. And based on that, you can tighten the restraint even more and put limits on your habits of speaking and socializing. Instead of taking or talking for enjoyment, you speak only with a purpose. Next, you should frequently go to places like forests where you can be alone, without distractions of physical and social kind. But again, always keep your attention watching, so to speak. Always keep an eye on your craving at any time, because any of those activities that I'm saying right now can also be unwholesome, can also be performed for reasons of trying to avoid bad feelings, for reasons of giving in to the pressure that makes you do certain things. And whenever there's pressure involved, it's not good. It's not wholesome. Anyway, so when you visit those places, you still need instructions to have frequent talks and discussions with other more advanced people, because you cannot be alone all the time unless you have attained the right view. And even then, it is beneficial to still discuss the Dhamma. And the last thing that should be frequently encouraged is simply the development of the right view. Frequently and thoroughly apply your mind there. Safety starts right there and nowhere else. Every other kind of safety is undermined by something else, and there's no true safety. It is a mirage. And that is exactly how the Buddha called it. So the only true safety, that is without any flaws, starts with the right view. And this is why you must understand craving, because the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, and that craving is a source of suffering, that is exactly what the right view is. And that must be part of every single contemplation that ever existed when it should lead you to understanding the Dhamma. And if you try to map all the things that we have analyzed thus far for a lay setting, it could look as follows. You basically want to optimize your life in a way that gives you as much time as possible to practice. You want friends who are preferably also practitioners, and it would be good to cut ties with people who are an obviously bad influence. Your surroundings should limit your access to sensual gratification. Maybe live a bit remote, close to nature, and without immediate access to all the sensual desires that you are interested in. It doesn't matter if there are things that you could do but have no interest in. Those are fine. You can live around those. But if you know that you have a problem with sweets or alcohol, then live apart from sweets and alcohol, by all means. Create a distance so that you cannot binge, cannot go back. Also use a bed that is not too inviting to spend more time than necessary in there, and eat simple food. Maybe buy for an entire week in advance to avoid impulse choices. And even when it comes to the bed, I mean, it's only really a problem if you have problems with staying in bed too long and enjoy it too much. If you never had that problem, then you can technically live in a high and luxurious bed. But most people are not very self-honest and cheat themselves when it comes to those things. So it's good to take that bed away, nonetheless, and maybe sleep on a more uncomfortable bedding. And lastly, the biggest other time sink apart from sleep would be work, but that must be done. It is part of our livelihood pretty much. It's basically 1/8 sleep, 1/8 free time, and 1/8 work. That work should be chosen in a way that allows you to live in accordance with what we have said before. Maybe work from home, in a job that allows fewer social interactions, Try to choose something where you are hopelessly overqualified to have more free time. Further, do not indulge in work to get rich or something, or to compete with others and be on top, or things like that. It is a means to an end. And it's simple to have more than you need if you have few wishes. So you don't need the best job. You need some job that allows you time to practice. The best job is this kind of job that allows you to be as little on the job as possible. That's kind of the thing. And that's basically all there is to it. The rest of the practice happens on the level of the mind, where you need to be determined. Rouse your energy, experience the joy of renunciation. And this is very important. It is a joy of renunciation. So it just arises as a byproduct, so to speak. It's a good byproduct, but it's not all about the good feeling. The noble one feels detached. That is something that you should always keep in mind. So when your practice revolves around feeling good and cultivating good feelings, so to speak, and that is your primary goal, then you move away from the Dhamma. Yeah, anyway. The best environment can only help you if you are honest and try. Even the monk with sensual wishes in the forest can only make progress if Dhamma is already his number one priority. In the end, you have to practice for yourself, and all those rules are training aids that protect you. If you do not put in the work of understanding what the practice really is, and how to do, you stop doing harmful things, progress is impossible. It is just like in the simile of the hen and the eggs that the Buddha gave out. And he pretty much said, monks, when a monk is not intent on development, even though he forms the wish, may my mind be liberated from the taints by non-clinging. Yet his mind is not liberated by the taints by non-clinging. For what reason? Because he lacks development. Suppose there was a hen with 8, 10, or 12 eggs that she has not properly covered, incubated, and nurtured. Even though she might form the wish, may my chicks pierce the shells with the points of their beaks and hatch safely. Yet the chicks are incapable of doing so. For what reason? Because the hen has not properly covered, incubated, and nurtured the eggs. Suppose there was a hen with 8, 10, or 12 eggs that had protected, covered, incubated, and nurtured the eggs. Even though she might not form the wish, may my chicks pierce their shells with the point of their claws and beaks and hatch safely. Yet the chicks are capable of doing so. For what reason? Because the hen had properly covered, incubated, and nurtured her eggs. And this is from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Seventh, number 71. The point of this is, if you do the things, or stop doing the things that are harmful, then the results will come. No matter if you wish to or not. You could even wish against it. It could do nothing. Well, you could not because there's craving involved, but you get what I mean. Anyway, let us now come to the most important points. First, lay practice is harder, but doable. The Buddha said explicitly, it is difficult to live the perfect and pure holy life at home, but it's not impossible. Try to limit sensuality as best as you can in that settings. You can do that by introducing self-rules that limit whatever sensual engagement you know you are susceptible to. Try to optimize your practice time within reason. Try to really create an environment where you can have nothing to do at all for prolonged periods of time. And make Sream Entry your priority. Without the right view, there is no real practice. There is some training in advance. But the real practice, the noble part of the practice, the path, the entire Noble Eightfold Path, starts with the right view, starts with Sream Entry. And without dedication and hard work, Sream Entry is impossible, but it should be your highest priority, and you should put in the work. You should try to understand, you should practice restraint and all the other things. And ultimately, you should and must understand craving as the sole reason that you are suffering. Anyway, this is pretty much it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy what I do, feel free to like and subscribe. If you have more questions or anything was unclear in this video, feel free to comment below. And either I or Saif and I will address those questions in future videos. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.